To prove that modern physics is the ultimate magic, I hauled out a massive shotgun. Fighting single-handedly against the Chuang King's 800,000-strong army, that battle shook the heavens and earth. It was absolutely thrilling. Within a 100-meter radius, the ground was littered with pieces. Everything within a kilometer, man and beast alike, was knocked out cold. Not only was the Chuang King completely stunned, even those civil officials in the city, who were just waiting to surrender the capital, wet their pants in terror. They never expected that just as Emperor Chongjun was preparing to become the ruler of a fallen empire, I would not only save him, but also lead him to crush the rebellion along the way. I even stalled Li Zicheng's attack. However, just as Chongjun was holding my hand, about to ask if I could blast them with another shot, I pointed at those trembling ministers and said, "Your Majesty, to resist foreign enemies, we must first purge the rot from within. Although my magic is powerful, it can't kill the parasites hiding inside the great Ming." Even before this battle started, they were secretly writing surrender letters to Li Zicheng. Wei Zhaoda and the others were so terrified they kowtowed wildly. "Your Majesty, please see the truth. We would never dare to betray you, even if we died 10,000 times. 10,000 deaths, Lord Wei? A few days ago, when His Majesty asked you to donate to the army, you cried poor and said you only had 500 taels of silver. You said you even pawned your wife's jewelry. Ha ha ha, is that the absolute truth? You lying old bastard, looks like I need to show you the hard proof." I pulled out my tablet and opened the offline list of corrupt late Ming officials and their assets. Li Hongxin, 5,000 taels. Wei Zhaoda, 3 private mansions in the capital, hiding 40,000 taels of silver in the cellars. 15,000 taels. Just last month, you spent 8,000 taels to buy a concubine. And you call yourself pure as water? Wei Zhaoda's face turned ashen. As he stood there trembling, I looked around at the entire court of officials. When Li Zicheng enters the city, he's going to use torture devices to squeeze the silver out of you. Rather than making it easy for those rebel bandits, why don't you hand it over right now? We'll call it a special national defense tax. Hearing this, the ministers wailed and howled, cursing me for spreading demonic lies to confuse the public, and demanding my execution, seeing that they wouldn't shed a tear until they saw their own coffins. I handed the prepared list to Emperor Chongjun. "Your Majesty, one search, and you will know the truth." Half an hour later, the pristine white marble steps were already stained red with blood. I pointed at the remaining few shivering, low-ranking officials who were actually clean. "Take the imperial bodyguards, go raid their homes and seize the cash, food, silk. Anyone who dares to hide them will meet this exact same fate. I want to see silver piled high across this square." The low-ranking officials didn't move, but instead looked at Chongjun. Furious, Chongjun delivered a swift kick to one of them. "From now on, whatever the gentleman says, is what I say." Looking at the officials scrambling away, Chongzhen's hand gripping the sword was still shaking, yet his face was flushed with absolute excitement. "Once we have the money, can we actually force the enemy to retreat? Money is only step one." Suddenly, the deafening roar of artillery echoed from afar, drawing closer and closer. Looks like Li Zicheng has snapped out of his daze. His vanguard has already broken through Zhengyang Gate. "Your Majesty, I'm going to teach you how to fire a cannon. The Forbidden City right now is a giant trap." I strode up to the Meridian Gate Tower and barked an order to the Imperial bodyguards. "Move every single gunpowder barrel from the armory up to the Meridian Gate Tower." But the Meridian Gate is the main entrance. If it falls, the whole point is to let them march through the Meridian Gate. I'm going to throw a massive barbecue party for Li Zicheng, right here in the Meridian Gate Square. Outside Zhengyang Gate, Li Zicheng's vanguard general, Lu Zongmin, sat atop a towering steed, screaming at the top of his lungs, "Brothers, take down the Forbidden City. The gold, the silver, the treasures, they're all yours for the taking." Tens of thousands of rebel soldiers flooded into the capital like a tidal wave. Meanwhile, up on the Meridian Gate Tower, I was holding my tablet, locking onto Lu Zongmin's head through the high-definition camera. I was calibrating it, a cannon, modified with modern physics. Inside the barrel of this calibrated red barbarian cannon wasn't a solid iron ball, but a supercharged grapeshot packed tightly with gunpowder, iron nails, and dry chili powder. Distance, 800 meters. Wind speed, level 3. Angle corrected. Welcome to hell, Lu Zongmin. A cloud of black and red smoke violently erupted from the Meridian Gate Tower. The very next second, my custom super grape shot exploded right in the middle of their dense charging formation. Iron nails, shattered porcelain, lead pellets, and dry chili powder flew absolutely everywhere. Dozens of the cavalrymen charging at the very front were instantly shredded into sieves, men and horses alike. Lu Zongmin's warhorse had half its head completely blown off. He was violently thrown through the air, his leg twisted at a sickeningly unnatural angle, and several iron nails were deeply embedded in his face. Sorcery, it's dark sorcery. The rebel army instantly spiraled into absolute chaos. The front lines frantically tried to fall back, while the back lines blindly pushed forward. Countless men were trampled to death by their own comrades. Emperor Chongjun stared blankly at the sheer carnage. He asked in a trembling voice, Is this really my red barbarian cannon? Why did it only ever just make a loud noise before? Your Majesty, this is the power of physics. Gunpowder isn't just for making a racket. It's for teaching these bastards a brutal lesson. Right at that moment, the minor officials in charge of confiscating properties returned with a whole convoy. The wooden carts were piled high with incredibly heavy chests. Silver ingots bounced with the rattling of the wheels, clattering and spilling right out onto the ground. My lord, Minister Wei Zhaoda and his cronies are absolutely filthy rich. I walked over to the Meridian Gate Square. Gathered here were the great Ming dynasty's final 8,000 soldiers, 3,000 from the Shenji Firearms Battalion, and 5,000 from the elite Beijing garrison. They were completely emaciated and sickly looking. Their armor and clothing were practically rags. Their eyes were filled with nothing but numb despair. They hadn't been paid a single ounce of silver in 3 whole months. I violently kicked over one of the silver chests. Hundreds upon thousands of silver ingots poured out like a waterfall. Right after that, dozens of other chests were tipped completely over. Gold, silver, and precious jewels instantly piled up into a literal mountain of wealth. Do you see this clearly? This is the money those corrupt bastards hoarded by sucking your blood dry. His Majesty has already executed every last one of them. From this exact moment on, killing one rebel soldier earns you 50 taels of silver. Killing a squad leader gets you 100 taels. If you don't want to fight, take your severance pay and get the hell out. But if you want to strike it rich, pick up your damn swords and fight with me. 100 taels? The soldiers absolutely lost their minds. Their furious roars pierced straight through the clouds. This deafening roar wasn't born from any reverence for imperial power. It was fueled purely by a ravenous thirst for wealth, and a primal, desperate hunger to survive. Emperor Chongjun watched this unfold with deeply conflicted eyes. Your teachings are indeed correct, sir. Hard silver is far more effective than any imperial decree. Now that the money had been handed out, they still actually needed to survive to spend it. My expression instantly hardened, and I began deploying our defenses. We tore down the waiting rooms right inside the Meridian Gate, and used the heavy wooden beams and bricks to construct solid street barricades. We gathered every last drop of grease and oil, poured it into clay pots, and stuffed them tightly with cloth rags. The Shenji Battalion musketeers would fire from behind the safety of the barricades, creating a deadly crossfire. The spearmen were instructed to focus entirely on stabbing the horses' legs. I purposefully left the main doors of the Meridian Gate wide open, piling up a massive wall of debris 20 meters inside. This was a classic deadly pocket trap. Once the sky fully brightened, Li Zicheng himself arrived to personally command the battle. Tens of thousands of his blue-clad troops surged toward the Meridian Gate like an unstoppable tidal wave. They relentlessly trampled right over the smoking ruins of Zhengyang Gate, howling like feral beasts as they charged straight inside. I hid behind the barricade, watching the enemy draw closer and closer. Closer, just a little closer. At 30 meters, the bandits could already see the piles of gold and silver. Greed made them forget the danger. Hundreds of flintlock muskets fired at the exact same time. The bandits charging into the gateway instantly fell in swaths. Right after that, clay pots filled with oil were hurled out, and flaming arrows rained down into the crowd. A massive fire erupted. This was a mixture of oil and powdered sugar, the great Ming's version of napalm. It ignited the moment it touched them. It burned brighter and fiercer. Our gateway had turned into a massive incinerator. The screams were absolutely blood-curdling. This slaughter lasted for an entire morning. Li Zicheng left behind 3,000 corpses, failing to cross that barricade by even a single step. The defenders collapsed to the ground, cheering for their survival. But I didn't cheer. My brows were tightly furrowed. The wind had changed direction. A scent far more dangerous than the stench of corpses was brewing in the warm breeze. By the afternoon, an eerie atmosphere began to spread through the military camp. First, a few soldiers who carried the bodies started vomiting with high fevers. Then, the symptoms spread like wildfire. While a squad leader from the firearms division was reporting the battle results, he suddenly collapsed to the ground. His whole body convulsed, foaming at the mouth. Black lumps the size of eggs bulged on his neck. Ah, the bubonic plague, it's the plague. Wang Chengen fell to the ground in sheer terror. Hearing his report, my heart sank. This was the plague, the final straw that crushed the Ming dynasty. In history, Beijing had long been left entirely desolate by it. The defenders had lost all combat power, which was exactly how Li Zicheng managed to take the city so easily. I pulled out a clean strip of cloth and covered my mouth and nose. Everyone, get back. From this moment on, anyone without a mask will be executed without mercy. Emperor Chongjun panicked. This is heaven's punishment. Heaven's punishment, my ass. This is a disease brought by fleas on rats. I quickly forced myself to calm down. I had medical data on my tablet. Even though we had no medicine, quarantine, cutting off the transmission routes, and high-temperature disinfection would definitely work. Your Majesty, if you want to live, listen to me. This was going to be even more ruthless than killing. Tell me your orders. First, the entire army must cover their faces with cloth. Violators will be beheaded. Second, the brocade guards will form an epidemic military police unit. Anyone with a fever, cough, or lumps on their neck will be locked in the Manhwa hall for quarantine. Anyone who resists will be shot on the spot. Third, gather all the quicklime and strong liquor in the city. As for the corpses in the plaza, douse them in kerosene and burn them to ashes. Then bury them deep. Burn the bodies? The dead must be respected. They must be buried to find peace. We'll suffer retribution for this. Retribution? I pulled the Glock pistol from my waist. Without hesitating, I pulled the trigger. This is retribution. Preach your superstitions to me, and you're just trying to get everyone in this city killed. The entire plaza fell dead silent. An anti-epidemic battle far more brutal than any war had just begun. The Forbidden City turned into a white world. There was quicklime everywhere, mixed with the smell of vinegar and the burnt stench of cremated bodies. The brocade guards put on white gowns. They roamed around like ghosts. Whenever they found a sick person, they would drag them away with long hooks. I also gave another order. 1 dead rat can be exchanged for 1 tael of silver. In just 4 short hours, the rats in the Forbidden City were practically wiped out. By dusk, a messenger from the Great Shun army arrived at the Meridian Gate, waving a white flag. King Shun is willing to let Chongjun live as a regional king, guaranteeing him a lifetime of wealth and luxury. Otherwise, we breach the city tomorrow, and leave absolutely no one alive. I knew Li Zicheng didn't really want to be emperor. He just wanted to extort some silver, pull his troops back, and fight the Manchus. But making a deal with the devil? That'll just get you killed even faster. I took his letter, and lit it straight on fire with my lighter. Go back and tell Li Zicheng. The emperor of Great Ming doesn't make deals with rebel scum. If he wants the throne, he'll have to pay for it with his life. I pulled out a makeshift megaphone I'd rigged up from a bamboo tube in my tablet. I hit play, and epic music blasted across the battlefield. At the same time, I lit the fuses on my toy cannons. The shells exploded right between the 2 armies with a massive bang. Tomorrow, at the crack of dawn, I'm walking out of those gates myself. I'm coming for his head. Tell him to wash his damn neck and wait for me. The messenger was so terrified he practically pissed himself running away. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away at Shanghai Pass, Wu Sangui was sitting there, holding surrender letters from both Li Zicheng and Dorgan. He was completely torn, but when he heard that Emperor Chongjun had summoned heavenly troops, and was raining silver down to rally his men, completely crushing Li Zicheng's vanguard, the teacup in his hand crashed to the floor, shattering to pieces. A sharp glint flashed in his eyes. Looks like we need a brand new strategy for this game. Back in Li Zicheng's main camp, seeing General Lu Zongmin so brutally beaten drove him into an absolute frenzy. He kicked his strategy table flying. I offered him an easy way out, and he spat in my face. Order the men to build siege ladders. Bring the battering rams to the east and west gates. We have hundreds of thousands of men. We could literally drown them with our spit. But before Li Zicheng even launched his attack the next day, the Forbidden City was already facing a brand new crisis. "Sir, the rice bins in the royal kitchens are completely empty. We can hold out for 2 more days, tops." I looked down at the watery porridge in Wang Chenggen's hands. It was so thin you could see your reflection in it. I stood up. My eyes drifted toward the royal stables in the northwest corner of the palace. They kept hundreds of priceless warhorses there, including the legendary blood-sweating steeds from the west. "Your Majesty, are you craving some meat?" "Meat? Where on earth would we find meat?" "Wait, the royal stables." "Absolutely not." Changjun and Wang Chenggen both protested at once. "Those horses are a sacred legacy from our ancestors. We still need them to break through the siege." "Break through the siege? Are you kidding me? If we bring hundreds of horses, it just makes us a massive target. We'll just die even faster. When you're starving to death, horses are just protein. They're pure combat power. Our soldiers need meat in their bellies to have the strength to swing their swords. If the horses live, the men starve to death. But if the horses die, the men get to live. So, Your Majesty, which is it going to be?" Changjun fell silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a heavy, painful sigh. "Kill them. Just keep 2 stallions for breeding, and slaughter all the rest." Just an hour later, the rich, savory smell of horse meat wafted through the Forbidden City. Hundreds of priceless, majestic horses had been chopped up and tossed into massive boiling pots. It was a bit short on salt, but to these starving, desperate soldiers, it might as well have been a gourmet feast. I grabbed a bowl of the meat stew and handed it to Changjun. Floating right in the broth was a chunk of thigh meat from his absolute favorite steed, the Knight Shining Jade. Changjun closed his eyes. A single tear slipped down his cheek. Then, he grabbed the bowl and chugged the whole thing down. "All right, you're fed. Now it's time to get to work." I pointed to a massive pile of leftover fireworks and firecrackers. "Li Zicheng is definitely going to launch a night raid on us tonight. We're severely outnumbered, so we'd better prep a little surprise for them. I'm modifying the Divine Fire Flying Crow, the Ming Dynasty's primitive rocket. White sugar mixed with potassium nitrate makes a simple propellant. Load the warheads with croton powder, chili dust, and highly flammable oil. This right here is a rapid burn toxic gas bomb. Your Majesty, roll those fuses a bit tighter. Tonight, let's show Li Zicheng what a whole new level of warfare looks like." Night fell, and the Forbidden City was dead silent. Suddenly, the heavy beating of drums echoed out, followed by a tidal wave of battle cries. Countless torches lit up the darkness. Dozens of siege ladders and battering rams advanced toward the Donghua Gate. I stood on the gate tower, watching the enemy draw closer and closer. 500 meters away. Let them get a bit closer before we strike. At 300 meters, the rebels' arrows began raining down on the wall. Light them up. 500 fuses were ignited all at once. It was as if a swarm of fire dragons had risen above the Donghua Gate. 500 bamboo rockets trailed thick plumes of smoke, blotting out the sky as they rained down on the Dishan rebel army. Fire dragons are descending from the heavens. The rebels screamed in sheer terror. The rockets smashed into the ground and exploded, splattering highly flammable oil all over the soldiers, siege ladders, and battering rams. Massive fires erupted. The chili dust and croton powder vaporized, forming thick clouds of toxic smoke. My eyes. This smoke is toxic. The front lines of the rebel army were instantly plunged into an inferno. In the rear, Li Zicheng watched with wide, bloodshot eyes. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How did Changjun suddenly get his hands on such terrifying, godlike weapons? Right at that moment, on the inner side of the Donghua Gate, a group of eunuchs was sneaking toward the gate. Their leader, Zhang Yixian, was once one of Changzhen's most trusted eunuchs. He had the keys tucked into his robes, planning to open the gates, surrender the city, and claim all the glory. He stabbed 2 frail guards to death. Just as he was about to lift the heavy gate beam, Wang Chenggen's voice echoed from the shadows. "Eunuch Zhang, where are you heading this late at night?" Zhang Yixian nearly jumped out of his skin. Just as he opened his mouth to make an excuse, the imperial guards behind Wang Chuan unleashed a volley of crossbow bolts, turning the dozen or so traitors into human pincushions. Wang Chuan closed the gates and locked them tight with 3 heavy iron padlocks. "Tell Master Jin, the house has been swept clean." By daybreak, the fires outside the Donghua Gate were still burning, but the battle cries had finally died down. Li Zicheng's massive army had retreated 5 miles back. The once arrogant, dashing king had finally been beaten into fear. I leaned back against the battlements. Covered in blood, my tablet's battery indicator showed 15%. Just then, Changjun handed me a cloth. "Sir, the rebels have retreated." "Only for now," I replied, wiping my face. I stared at the distant enemy camp. Li Zicheng might run, but our mission is far from over. I'm going to take these hundreds of thousands of rebels, and the Manchus beyond the pass, and bury every last one of them right here. I woke up my tablet. On the map, a single red dot was moving rapidly toward Beijing. Looking at the time, Wu Sangui should be arriving soon. After that massive barbecue party outside the gate came to an end, the stench of charred flesh lingered like restless ghosts. Hovering over the Forbidden City for 3 whole days. Those 3 days in Beijing were both eerily quiet and utterly insane. Quiet, because the once noisy circles of powerful elites had been completely uprooted. The mansions of ministers and high officials were plastered with sealing tape, leaving nothing but the sound of the imperial guards hauling out confiscated treasures. Insane, because an entirely new world order was quietly being built right from the ashes. Out in the plaza, Changjun stood holding a massive, mountain-high inventory list of supplies. His fingers were trembling. 78 million taels of silver in cash, 120,000 dan of grain, and 300,000 bolts of cloth. Halfway through reading, he fiercely slammed the list onto the ground. He threw his head back and roared, laughing until tears streamed down his face. "I have been destitute my entire life, just for a few tens of thousands of taels of military funds. I begged and pleaded with those ministers like a dog, and it turns out, the money was here all along. Right under my very nose." He laughed, a sound both mad and utterly desolate. These over 70 million taels were the very lifeblood of the Ming dynasty. Yet they were sucked into the pockets of those parasites, as I watched helplessly while the nation bled dry. I sat on a wooden crate nearby, stitching up a wound on my own arm. It was a graze from a stray arrow during the chaotic battle the night before. "Your Majesty, now is not the time to cry about being poor. We have money, and we have grain. But the hearts of the people are not yet united. Li Zicheng has retreated to Liangshan to regroup. He could strike back at any moment. The commoners and the remaining soldiers in the city might be terrified. But they still don't completely trust you." Changjun stopped his laughter. His eyes turned icy cold. "I killed the corrupt officials. And I distributed the silver. And they still don't trust me? Money can only buy their lives, it can't buy their hearts." I walked right up to him and pulled out a manuscript I had prepared earlier. "Your Majesty, you need to step out there. But no more of that overly formal, poetic nonsense. Read exactly from this. In a moment, we are going to the medical camp. Read it loud, right in front of everyone. And remember, you have to cry. Cry for real, and if you can't force the tears, just think back to that day you were ready to hang yourself on Coal Hill." Changjun took the paper and skimmed it, his expression turning quite bizarre. Is this something an emperor should say? This is how a human speaks. If you want to be an emperor for the ages, you have to peel off that layer of golden paint first. At 1:15, the Forbidden City's training grounds had been converted into a medical camp and quarantine zone. Over 1,000 wounded soldiers and patients recovering from a mild plague lay groaning on straw mats. The air was thick with the stench of herbs, blood, and vinegar. The emperor arrives. There was no royal procession. No ceremonial whips cracking. Changjun wore a faded dragon robe, still stained with patches of dried blood. Holding a chipped bowl in his hands, he stepped into that foul, reeking camp, one step at a time. Wang Chengen, his eyes red and swollen, and I followed closely behind him. The soldiers struggled to sit up and kowtow, but Changjun pressed them back down. "Don't move." His voice was hoarse. It carried an exhaustion he had never shown before. "I just came to see you all." He walked up to an old soldier who had lost his leg. This man was once a slick, seasoned veteran. He was the craftiest one on the battlefield, always dodging trouble. But 2 nights ago, at the East Prosperity Gate, he fiercely clung to a rebel's leg and had his own leg chopped off for it. Looking down at the bloody, gauze-wrapped stump, Changjun suddenly dropped to one knee. That single kneel plunged the entire camp into dead silence. An emperor, kneeling before a lowly grunt. In the 270 years of the Ming dynasty, it was completely unheard of in history. "Your Majesty, you are cursing this humble servant." The old soldier shook violently in terror, tears and snot streaming down his face. Chongjun didn't say a word. He just took a hot towel from Wang Chuan's hands and clumsily wiped the dirt and grime from the old soldier's face. Then, he stood up. He looked around at the crowd and pulled out the edict of repentance I had written for him. I used to be a complete bastard. That very first sentence made everyone's jaws drop to the floor. I thought being an emperor just meant stamping papers and yelling at ministers. I thought that as long as I worked hard, the whole world would be fine. I was wrong. I was totally blind. I put my trust in corrupt scumbags, while leaving you all to starve and bleed on the battlefield. As he reached the emotional climax, tears welled up and streamed down his face. Today, I am laying it all out right here. From this day forward, I won't wear fine silk, and I won't eat fancy delicacies. As long as a single soldier of the great Ming goes hungry, and as long as a single rebel remains alive, I refuse to return to my palace. I'll drink this bowl of soup first to show my respect. We stand together, in life and in death. The bowl was smashed to pieces. After a brief, stunned silence, an earth-shattering roar of weeping and howling erupted from the crowd. Long live the emperor! We will fight to the death for your majesty. These illiterate, rough men couldn't understand big, fancy words. They didn't get all that poetic jargon, but they absolutely understood this. They understood the word, bastard, and they understood the emperor wiping their dirty faces and drinking the exact same bitter medicine as them. This kind of respect, of finally being treated like real human beings, fired them up way more than 100 taels of silver ever could. I stood quietly in the corner, watching it all unfold. A satisfied smirk crept onto my face. Looks like my acting skills are definitely improving. I glanced down at my tablet. The battery had dropped to 14%. This little political stunt just bought the Ming dynasty at least another 6 months of life. Pass down the order. Pick 500 of the fiercest, most fearless fighters from these wounded men. Once they're healed, I'm going to train them myself. I've even got the perfect name. We'll call them the Great Ming Special Tactics Unit. By nightfall, about 300 miles away from Beijing in Yongping Prefecture, Wu Sanggui's elite cavalry was camped right outside the city walls. Inside the main tent, the Earl of Pingxi was toying with a jade pendant. Listening to his scout's report, "My lord, the news from the capital is confirmed. Emperor Chongjun isn't dead. He executed the chief minister and slaughtered the rebels. He even used heavenly thunder and earthly fire to send Li Zicheng fleeing in a panic. My lord, the news from the capital is absolute. Chongjun isn't dead. He executed the chief minister and slaughtered the rebels. He used heavenly thunder and earthly fire to completely rout Li Zicheng's army." Wu Sanggui's brow furrowed deeply. This wildcard completely derailed all his plans. He had been banking on the emperor dying. He figured he could march his army back and either surrender to Li Zicheng to protect the interests of his Guan-Ning forces, or defect to Dorgan and borrow the Manchu troops for revenge. But now, his boss wasn't just alive. He was suddenly throwing around heavenly thunder and earthly fire? It's probably just a massive exaggeration. I know exactly what Chongjun is capable of. He's got huge ambitions but zero actual talent. He's stubborn and arrogant. This is probably just his last dying gasp. But my lord, Li Zicheng really did retreat. Retreating isn't the same as losing. Li Zicheng still acts like a petty bandit. The moment he hits a snag, his first instinct is to run. But Dorgan is a whole different beast. Those men are a pack of starving wolves. Right now, the Ming dynasty is just a juicy piece of meat. The wolves have arrived, and the wild dog has run away. But suddenly, the master of the house has a brand new knife in his hand. How fascinating. Right at that exact moment, a loud commotion broke out outside the tent. "Who goes there? How dare you trespass into the Earl of Pingxi's camp? Just an old friend coming for a visit. Lord Wu, is this how you treat your guests?" I stood there in my signature flying fish uniform, completely covered in dust from the road. I hadn't even put down my riding whip. I was desperately racing against the clock. I used the map navigation on my tablet to take a shortcut, riding 3 horses to death. It took me just 1 day and 1 night to get here, with only 2 Jinyue guards following behind me. Yet we rolled in with the presence of a massive army. Let him in. I walked straight over, sat down in the chair right across from him, and grabbed the tea off the table. "I'm dying of thirst. Who are you?" Wu Sanggui rested his hand on the hilt of his sword, radiating murderous intent. His personal guards around him also drew their blades. commander of the Jinyue, serving directly before the emperor. Grand preceptor of the great Ming, Little Jin. I am here by His Majesty's decree. To save your life. Save me? HMPH. I command 50,000 troops and hold the Shanghai Pass. I can attack if I advance, and defend if I retreat. Why the hell would I need you to save me? Advance and attack? Attack who? Li Zicheng? Retreat and defend? Defend against who? Dorgan? Give me a break, Wu Changbai. Right now, you're literally a sandwich cookie. Li Zicheng is dying to eat you alive, and Dorgan just wants to use you as his pawn. Once they hit you from both sides, how many of your 50,000 Guaning iron cavalry will even be left? Wu Sanggui's face instantly dropped. This was exactly what he was most terrified of. HMPH, I can always surrender to the great Qing. He probed, surrender to the Qing? I acted like I had just heard the funniest joke in the world. I suddenly whipped out my tablet. Even without Wi-Fi, the offline docs and cached videos were more than enough to scare the living hell out of people. I tapped open a picture. It showed the gruesome historical aftermath of Wu Sanggui's later years, when Kangxi stripped him of his title and executed his entire family. Even though it was just a screenshot from a TV show, the facial features looked eerily similar to him. Come take a look at your ending. I shoved the glowing screen right in his face. The glowing screen looked incredibly eerie inside the dim tent, even though Wu Sanggui had no clue what kind of magical artifact this was. The gruesome image still made him stumble a half step back in fear. This isn't dark magic, it's the future. I pulled the tablet back, my gaze turning deadly sharp. You think Dorgan actually values you? In his eyes, you're nothing but a watchdog. The second you outlive your usefulness, he's gonna chop you up and make a stew out of you. If you want to be a traitor, I won't stop you. But you had better think it through. The price of being a race traitor is going down in history as ultimate scum. And having your entire bloodline wiped out. Wu Sanggui broke into a cold sweat. This young man's aura was terrifyingly overwhelming. That piercing gaze that seemed to see right through everything actually made a battle-hardened veteran like him shudder in fear. Then, what are the Emperor's intentions? He finally caved, his tone softening dramatically. I stood up and gave his thick, sturdy shoulders a reassuring pat. The Emperor has spoken. As long as you don't turn your back on the Great Ming. The Great Ming will never turn its back on you. You'll be crowned a king, and I don't mean that fake, empty title the Manchus offer. You will be the king of Pingxi, hereditary forever. But, there's one condition. Open the gates of the Shanghai Pass. What? Wu Sanggui turned deathly pale in pure shock. Open the gates? Wouldn't that let the Qing army march straight through? Exactly, we want them to come in. A flash of pure madness gleamed in my eyes. Trap the dog behind closed doors, get it? We led Dorgan inside the pass. And out on the North China Plain, you, me, and a forcefully dragged in Li Zicheng. The three of us are gonna trap the 8 Banners Iron Cavalry in a massive meat grinder. Wu Sanggui stared at me, like he was looking at an absolute madman, but the gambler's blood rushing through his veins. My ambition was completely ignited in this moment. The plan was absolutely crazy, but it could break the current deadlock, turning him from a pawn into the player. Alright, Wu Sanggui gritted his teeth, slamming his palm heavily onto the table. I'll take this gamble. Getting Wu Sanggui on board was easier than I thought. The key was the information gap. In this era of primitive communication, whoever controls the intel is practically a god. Not only did I know Dorgan's troop deployments, I even knew the exact whereabouts of his beloved concubine, Chen Yuanyuan. She was still in Lu Zongmin's hands. Dropping these pieces of intel like bombs blew Wu Sanggui's mind completely. He had no choice but to fall in line. But the journey back to the capital was far from easy. My 2 imperial guards and I rode on swift horses, galloping down the main road. The whole capital region was a total war zone right now. Li Zicheng might have retreated, but the stragglers he left behind, the bandits looting in the chaos, and the desperate refugees fleeing everywhere made this route incredibly unpredictable. My lord, Sanhe County is up ahead. Looks like it's been sacked by rebels. We should take a detour. I glanced at the map on my tablet. A detour meant an extra 80 miles, and my tablet's battery was down to 12%. I had to get back to the capital before it died completely, so I could use the blueprints inside. To finish the final piece of the puzzle, the artillery upgrades. No detour, we're pushing through. I patted the Glock on my hip. I only had 2 bullets left, but I still had my blade, and my brains. The 3 of us spurred our horses into the town. The streets were littered with corpses. A few stray rebels were gathered around a rice shop, trying to smash the heavy doors in. I wasn't looking for a fight. I planned to speed up and ride right past them. But just then, a frail, childish cry came from a pile of dead bodies by the road. "Mommy, Mommy, wake up." A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, was desperately shaking a blood-soaked woman. The dead woman's hand was still clutching half a moldy bun. "My lord, quiet, keep moving. A soft heart has no place in war. Saving one person could cost me the time I needed to save the whole damn country." The consequences would be catastrophic, but we had barely ridden 40 feet, and over a dozen rebels armed with spears suddenly jumped out, blocking our path. Well, look at these fat sheep," one sneered. "Nice horses. Leave your gear and your lives. You're looking pretty soft and tender. Just right for the boys to have a little feast." Commander Zhao and the other guard instantly drew their blades. "You're dead." A skirmish broke out instantly. I didn't even draw my sword. I just vaulted straight off my horse, using the momentum to plant a flying kick right into the one-eyed leader's chest. Crack! The sickening crunch of shattering ribs echoed. Before the one-eyed bastard could even react, he was sent flying 10 feet through the air. Dead on the spot. That's the difference between modern close-quarters combat and ancient brute force. Fast, precise, and lethal. The remaining rebels, seeing their boss instantly wiped out, froze for a split second, before howling and swarming us. "Finish them, fast." I snatched a spear off the ground. Striking like a viper, I thrust the spear 3 times. 3 rebels dropped, clutching their torn throats. Commander Zhao and my other guard were top-tier elites, too. They sliced through the remaining grunts like hot knives through butter. The fight was over in seconds. But my warhorse had been slashed. Its leg was crippled. Damn it, I stared at the ruined beast, my brow furrowed in deep frustration. Just then, the little girl ran over out of nowhere, holding up that bloody steamed bun. Timidly, she offered it to me. "Here, mister, eat." She thought we were here to steal her food, trying to trade a bun for her life. I stared at that filthy bun, then back at the little girl, at those eyes, pure as black gems. There was no hatred in her gaze, only the raw, primal instinct to survive. At that moment, something hard inside my chest just cracked. I remembered the statistics I read in history books before I time traveled. The great chaos of the late Ming dynasty. The population plummeted by 60%. Swapping children for food was just the norm. This is a real world at war, not some fantasy novel where you just level up and kill monsters. It's a living, breathing hell on Earth. I crouched down, didn't take the bun, and reached into my coat. I pulled out a piece of beef jerky I swiped from Wu Sangui's camp, and shoved it into her little hands. "Here, take this. Find somewhere to hide, and don't come out." After saying that, I stood up and untied the packs from Centurion Zhao's horse. I slung them over my own shoulder. "Leave one horse for the kid. We walk." "But sir, we're still over 30 miles from the capital." "Then we run. Special Forces loaded march. This distance is nothing. Move out." 2 days later, at the Beijing Shenjiying firearms camp, I was sporting massive dark circles under my eyes, totally unshaven. Gripping a piece of charcoal, furiously sketching blueprints on a huge sheet of rice paper. My tablet was sitting right next to me, screen brightness turned all the way down. The battery was at barely 8%. Damn it, no, Plan B's seal isn't tight enough. I crumpled up a scrap of paper in frustration and tossed it. I was busy designing mini-A balls and fuses for explosive shells. Mini-A balls. They'd give our smoothbore muskets the accuracy and range of a modern rifle. And the explosive shells would turn solid iron cannonballs into actual high-explosive grenades. This was our ultimate weapon against the Manchu cavalry. Emperor Chongjun stood right beside me, like an eager little schoolboy, holding a teacup in both hands, ready to pour me water at a moment's notice. "Sir," the senior craftsman from the Ministry of Works said, "that hollow iron balls packed with gunpowder will just blow up inside the cannon barrel before they even fire. That's just because they're stupid. As long as the fuse is timed perfectly, we can use the inertia from the launch to ignite it, or build a wooden time fuse." I sketched out an intricate wooden tube mechanism on the paper. This was tech that didn't become mainstream until World War I, using the burn rate of wood to dictate the exact moment of detonation. It's crude, yeah, but for this era, it's absolute alien technology. Eunuch Wang: "Yes, sir. Go find the best carpenters in the city. Have them turn these out of hardwood." I need thousands of these tubes. And they need to be drilled hollow. Precision is absolutely critical. Yes, sir, your majesty, I am here. Go gather the best blacksmiths in the entire city. Melt down every single copper coin and bronze Buddha statue you can find. I need to make shell casings. Iron shatters and blows the barrel. Copper is way more malleable. Melt the Buddha statues? Won't that be wildly disrespectful to the Buddha? I snapped my head up, my eyes totally bloodshot. If the Buddha can stop Dorgan's iron cavalry, I'll cast him a solid gold statue myself. But if he can't stop them, then let him become a bodhisattva of destruction and blow those Tartars straight to hell. It's called physical salvation. Chongjun was stunned by my absolute heresy for a second, then gave a heavy, firm nod. Good, physical salvation. I shall go tear down the temples this very instant. Under my relentless push, the entire city of Beijing was transformed into a massive arsenal. No lathes? We ground the parts by hand. No temperature control? We relied on raw experience. Thousands of craftsmen worked day and night, spurred on by the dual motivation of cracking whips and clinking silver. They were creating absolute miracles. Meanwhile, an urgent military dispatch was thrust into my hands. It read, Dorgan's massive army had crossed the Shanhai Pass. The messenger's voice trembled with sheer despair. My lord, Wu Sangui has truly rebelled. Even though I had told them this was all part of the plan, when the moment actually arrived. A tidal wave of fear still washed over the room. But me? I just smiled. I set down my charcoal pencil and calmly blew the graphite dust off the paper. They're finally here. I glanced down at my tablet. The battery was down to just 5%. That little bit of juice was only enough for one last tactical simulation on the battlefield. Your Majesty, don't panic. I stood up, rolling my stiff neck until it cracked. Wu Sangui hasn't rebelled. He's just inviting the wolves into our house. Except, what these wolves don't know is that there are no fat sheep waiting for them inside. They're about to face a pack of hunters armed to the teeth with shotguns. Pass down my orders to the entire army. My voice instantly turned cold and commanding. Grab all of our gear. We march out of the city to Tongzhou. We're taking this fight out into the open. We are going head to head with the 8 Banners cavalry in a brutal final showdown. A field battle? Chongjun was absolutely stunned. Infantry against their elite cavalry? Out in the open? Sir, that is the ultimate military taboo. Taboo? I scoffed, walking over to the wall. I grabbed the gleaming, freshly polished flintlock musket. Times have changed, Your Majesty. In the age of line infantry volley fire, cavalry are nothing but moving targets. This was the northern terminus of the Grand Canal, and the absolute last line of defense east of the capital. Further east lay the endlessly flat North China Plain, a vast, natural hunting ground perfectly suited for a charging cavalry. Howling winds whipped up a sky full of yellow sand, stinging our faces like tiny needles. 20,000 soldiers of the Ming dynasty, including the battered remnants of the elite firearms division, along with hastily drafted civilian laborers from Tongzhou, were frantically digging trenches across the wide open plains. Hurry up, if you don't want to die today, you better dig deeper. I gripped a military trenching shovel and jumped straight into the mud to show them how it's done. The trenches need to be dug in a zigzag pattern. Do not dig them in a straight line. Otherwise, you're just building a bowling alley for their cannonballs. The soldiers had no idea what a bowling alley was, but they understood the fierce intensity in my eyes. It was the sheer, brutal determination to conquer this very patch of dirt. Emperor Chongjun was sitting on an old millstone, his royal boots completely caked in thick mud. He was gnawing on a rock-hard steamed bun, staring out at the chaotic, bustling construction site before him. Then he glanced out toward the eerily empty horizon, his heart pounding with creeping dread. Sir, I still do not understand. He forcefully swallowed a dry, tough bite of dough. Straining his neck to get it down, he gasped, the ancient military texts say that infantry fighting cavalry must defend behind city walls, or form tightly packed circular formations. Yet here we are, digging holes out in the open plains. Once the Manchu cavalry charges, aren't we just destined to be trampled into the mud? Military texts? I countered. From what century? I climbed out of the muddy trench and roughly dusted off my uniform. Qi Jiguang's manuals? Or Sun Tzu's Art of War? Your Majesty, those ancient books only teach you how to fight with swords and spears. What do we have in our hands right now? We've got firearms. In the age of firearms, distance means absolutely everything. Do you know what cavalry is terrified of the most? It's not spears. It's being stopped dead in their tracks. We dug these 3 trenches. The first one to break their charge, the second to block their arrows. And the third one is our absolute kill zone. And right in front of these trenches, I cracked a wicked smile, pointing to the 300 meters right in front of our line. That patch of wasteland might look completely flat, but out there, thousands of laborers just buried countless little surprises. It's rigged with the most primitive and vicious caltrops and horse traps. And I made sure they coated every single caltrop in absolute filth. If a horse's hoof gets even a tiny scratch, the tetanus bacteria alone will put those beasts out of their misery. But Dorgon has 100,000 elite cavalry. Emperor Chongzhen's voice was still shaking. 100,000? I sneered, glancing down at the tablet strapped to my wrist. The battery was down to just 4%, and the screen displayed offline files. Research on early Qing 8 banners' troop strength. It was all just a massive bluff. Even at their absolute maximum, the Qing 8 banners only have around 50 or 60,000 men. Add in Wu Sangui's 50,000 Guanning cavalry, and they barely break the 100,000 mark. Besides, they're all scheming against each other. There is no way they're going to charge us all at once. I stepped right up to Changzhen and lowered my voice. Your Majesty, this is actually a psychological war. The Manchus are incredibly superstitious. They truly believe the great Ming dynasty is completely doomed. All we have to do is shatter that delusion with our very first volley. Suddenly, the frantic pounding of hooves shattered the noise of the camp. A scout came galloping back, his face completely covered in blood, with a white feathered arrow sticking straight out of his back. Report, they're here. The Tartars are here. He tumbled violently off his horse, screaming until his voice broke. The plain white banner vanguard. They're less than 10 miles away. It felt like a bomb went off in everyone's heads. The exact same soldiers who were just whining about digging trenches were now shaking so hard they could barely hold their shovels. It was pure, instinctive terror of the old myth that 10,000 Manchus were completely invincible. For decades now, the Ming army had been utterly traumatized and butchered by the 8 banners. That absolute dread was burned deep into their bones. What the hell are you afraid of? My furious roar exploded like thunder over the camp as I leapt up onto a high dirt mound. I drew the Emperor's sword, which was basically mine to use now anyway, and pointed it dead east. Everyone, get into the goddamn trenches. First row, load your weapons. Second row, ready your matchlocks. Artillery, strip the cannon covers. And remember the golden rule I taught you. I don't care how fast their cavalry charges. If I don't give the order to fire, I'll blow the brains out of the first idiot who pulls the trigger. Let them get nice and close. We don't fire until I can clearly see the damn pockmarks on their ugly faces. Out on the distant horizon, a thick black line appeared, quickly swelling into a massive dark tide. You could feel the very earth trembling right under our boots. Dorgan's vanguard general, Heluahui, was riding a massive black warhorse, staring straight ahead with pure, arrogant contempt. All he saw were a few pathetic-looking dirt ditches. But right behind him were 5,000 elite Manchu white armor guards, decked out in double-layered heavy armor. Every single one of them was a ruthless killing machine who had crawled out of a mountain of corpses. Ha ha ha, Ho Lo Wei raised his riding whip and laughed maniacally. Is this really all Changzhen has left? A bunch of beggars rolling around in the mud. Do they really think a few pathetic ditches can stop our great Qing's iron cavalry? The lieutenant beside him hesitated. My lord, Wu Sangui warned us that these Ming soldiers have some bizarre firearms. Bizarre my ass. Those Ming dogs' firearms are nothing but loud firecrackers. Ho Lo Wei spat in contempt. Order the entire army to charge. The first man to breach their trenches gets 1,000 Han slaves. Whoever captures Changzhen alive will be crowned king. 5,000 armored cavalrymen let out a beastly, deafening roar all at once. The war horns blared into the sky. At that very moment, the ground began to tremble. 5,000 warhorses broke into a gallop. The dust kicked up by their thundering hooves completely blotted out the sun. That overwhelming, earth-shattering momentum was enough to make any infantry force of the cold weapon era completely break down. Down in the trenches, the Ming soldiers were breathing heavily. Some had even wet their pants in terror. Changzhen was crouching in the central command bunker, his hands gripping the dirt so tightly that all his fingernails had snapped off. He wanted to squeeze his eyes shut, but I was right there next to him. calmly using my tablet's camera to measure the distance. 1 kilometer, I called out flatly. The cavalry was incredibly fast, closing the gap in the blink of an eye. 800 meters. The artillerymen manning the red barbarian cannons held their torches high, not daring to blink even as sweat stung their eyes. 500 meters. The ground was shaking like an earthquake, shaking loose dirt from the top of the trenches. 400 meters. At 400 meters, a savage grin spread across Ho Lo Hui's face. He could already see the sheer terror in the eyes of the Ming soldiers. He drew his massive saber, fully prepared to begin the slaughter. 300. I lowered the tablet, my eyes instantly turning as sharp as a blade. Fire. Across the Tongzhou defense line, 30 of my heavily modified red barbarian cannons roared to life all at once. But this time, they weren't firing grapeshot. They were firing hollow explosive shells. Dozens of brass spheres, their fuses hissing with pale blue smoke, shrieked across the sky and slammed right into the center of the charging cavalry formation. Ho Lo Wei froze for a second. The metal spheres hit the dirt and just bounced and rolled harmlessly a few times. They didn't smash through men and horses like solid cannonballs. Instead, they just sat there in the mud. Duds. Ha ha ha, I knew those Ming dogs. Before his laughter could even fade, a blinding flash of fire detonated right in the middle of the cavalry. Followed immediately by a second blast, then a third. This wasn't the weak pop of standard black powder. This was the deafening roar of corned, high-explosive powder, mixed to the absolute perfect chemical ratio. Deadly shrapnel ripped through the air, expanding outward from the blast zones. Sweeping in every direction with zero blind spots, the perfectly aligned cavalry formation was instantly blown to pieces. It looked as if a giant, invisible hand had just scooped a chunk of flesh right out of their ranks. What the hell is this? Ho Lo Hui's horse reared up on its hind legs, terrified by the shockwave. He watched in absolute horror as his elite bodyguards were blown to bloody bits right next to him. Both men and horses were reduced to a pile of mangled flesh. But as devastating as the artillery fire was, the reload speed was painfully slow, and the sheer momentum of 5,000 charging cavalrymen was just too much to stop. Driven by pure adrenaline and momentum, the survivors blindly charged past the 300-meter mark. Keep charging. Once we get in close, they're dead meat. However, when they reached the 100-meter mark from the trenches, the horses leading the charge suddenly let out agonizing shrieks. Their front legs buckled, and they violently crashed into the dirt. Their hooves had been entirely pierced through by iron caltrops. The riders were violently launched from their saddles like cannonballs, slamming brutally into the hard ground. The sickening crunch of snapping necks echoed through the air. What's going on? There's something on the ground. The cavalry behind them desperately tried to pull their reins, but it was already way too late. The riders in the back slammed right into the ones in front, triggering a massive, chaotic pile-up in an instant. The once unstoppable torrent of iron cavalry was halted just 100 meters away from the civilian houses. Stopped dead in their tracks by those unassuming iron spikes. That was the deadly speed bump I had prepared just for them. Now, volley fire. From the first trench, 1,000 muskets spat tongues of fire all at once. It wasn't the scattered popping of firecrackers, but a synchronized volley that roared like a massive clap of thunder. This was the very core of line infantry tactics. At a distance of 100 meters, the armor-piercing power of the Manchu cavalry's hornbows was severely weakened. Especially since my Ming soldiers were hunkered down in the trenches with only their heads exposed. High-angle arrow fire was practically useless. But for my upgraded rifled Minié muskets, that distance was like pressing the muzzle right against their foreheads. The sickening thud of lead bullets tearing into flesh echoed everywhere. My modified Minié balls were cone-shaped. With a hollow base, the expanding gunpowder gases would force the bullet to expand, gripping the rifling tight as it spun out of the barrel. That spin gave it devastating stability and armor-piercing power. The double-layered heavy armor those Manchu elites were so proud of was as brittle as a cracker against the Minié balls. A single shot shattered the breastplate of He Luohui's deputy general. It blasted a bowl-sized hole right through his chest, ripping out bone fragments and guts as it exited his back. The same bullet then snapped the leg of a horse behind him. The screams of agony were instantly drowned out by the deafening gunfire. The front line of their cavalry was mowed down like stalks of wheat. First rank, step back. Second rank, step up and fire. The Ming officers screamed at the top of their lungs. It was a drill they had practiced countless times. The moment the first rank fired, they immediately ducked and fell back, using the trenches for cover. To swab their barrels and reload their ammo, the fully prepared second rank stepped right up, raised their rifles, and pulled the triggers. Another perfectly synchronized volley, this relentless, non-stop barrage of firepower, completely shattered the Manchu cavalry's understanding of war. In their past experience, the Ming army's 3-barrel hand cannons were as useless as wooden sticks after firing a single volley. That was usually the moment their cavalry would charge in, slaughtering our men like chopping vegetables. But why wasn't the gunfire stopping? Those elite white armor guards, ruthless killers who wouldn't bat an eye at murder, finally broke down in utter panic. Witchcraft, this is dark magic. They couldn't even see the enemy. They could only watch their brothers in arms drop dead, one by one. He Luohui had already been thrown from his horse, his helmet long gone. His hair was a tangled mess, and a bullet had ripped right through his left arm. His entire arm dangled uselessly by his side. Fall back, retreat, trying to run, huh? From the safety of the trench, I looked through the spyglass I'd swiped from Wu Sangui, the one with the custom polished lenses. I coldly locked onto the bastard wearing the fanciest suit of armor. I didn't bother with a flintlock musket. Instead, I raised the Glock in my hand, with exactly one bullet left in the chamber. The distance was 120 meters. A bit far for a handgun, but worth a shot. I took a slow, deep breath and held it. Gripping the gun with both hands, I rested the iron sights right between He Luohui's shoulder blades. The crisp crack of the pistol cut sharply through the chaotic roar of the battlefield. In the distance, He Luohui, who had just scrambled onto a riderless horse, suddenly froze. That 9mm parabellum round, even with its lost kinetic energy over such a long distance, still drilled perfectly into the back of his skull. A spray of red and white matter splattered across the horse's mane. He didn't even let out a grunt. He just crumpled and slammed into the dirt like a busted sack of potatoes. I holstered my gun, grabbed the megaphone, and roared, "The enemy general is dead. Heluahui is dead? The Tartars are defeated. Heluahui is dead. The Tartars are defeated." The Ming soldiers frantically chanted those words. Their fear of the Manchu cavalry vanished into thin air, replaced by the pure thrill of kicking an enemy while they were down. A completely absurd scene unfolded on the battlefield. Swarms of infantry leapt out of the trenches, charging with bayonets made from sharpened broken blades. They chased after the remaining few hundred cavalrymen, screaming, "Don't run. Leave your heads behind so we can trade them for silver. That horse is mine. Back off, don't steal it from me." 10 miles away, inside Dorgan's central command tent, he was sipping mare's milk wine and playing chess with Hong Chengchu. "Mr. Hong, tell me, do you think Heluahui has already breached Tongzhou City? He must be drinking to his victory by now." Dorgan placed a chess piece on the board, looking completely calm and relaxed. Hong Chengchu stroked his beard and smiled. "Your Highness, the moment our mighty army arrives, the Ming troops will be shaking in their boots. If that little brat Chongjun knows what's good for him, he should be tying himself up to surrender right about now." But right at that moment, a sharp, terrifying horse whinny pierced the air. A few blood-soaked cavalrymen, stripped of their armor, stumbled and crashed into the front of the tent. "Your Highness, we're defeated. It's a total wipeout." Lord Heluahui was blown to pieces by the Ming army's demon bombs. Out of 5,000 brothers, barely any made it back. Dorgan violently shot up from his seat and grabbed the messenger by the collar. "What the hell did you just say? 5,000 elite white armor troops, wiped out in less than an hour?" "Why, yes, the Ming army's muskets are pure evil. They can punch right through double-layered armor from hundreds of paces away. And they don't even use lit fuses. They also have giant thunder bombs that explode right on the ground." "Your Highness, they are demon soldiers." Dorgan's face instantly turned a livid pale. He shoved the messenger away and stormed out of the tent, glaring toward Tongzhou. The air over there was thick with gunpowder smoke, and the faint roars of a massacre drifted over. "Where is Wu Sangui? Where the hell is his Guaning cavalry?" Lord Wu's troops are stationed on the flank, but they haven't moved an inch. They're even falling back. "Ha, good old Wu Sangui." Dorgan laughed with pure, boiling rage, yanking out his waist sword and violently hacking the wooden post in front of him in half. "That bastard is setting a trap for me. He wants to sit back and watch the tigers tear each other apart. Hong Chengchu panicked. He rushed forward. Your Highness, it is not safe to stay here. If the Ming army truly possesses such devastating firepower, we must fall back and avoid their wrath. We must retreat to Shanhai Pass. Retreat? Dorgan snapped his head back. His eyes were as savage as a wounded wolf's. Ever since our great Qing raised its banners. When have we ever retreated? If we let this one battle scare us into running, how will we ever conquer the Central Plains? Right here, beneath the walls of Tongzhou, lies the very destiny of our great Qing. He took a deep, trembling breath, forcing down the stormy waves of panic in his chest. Pass down my orders. Tell Ajij and Dodo to bring up every single elite soldier from the yellow and red banners. 20,000 men. No, 50,000. The entire army attacks at once. This time, no splitting up, no testing the waters. I want those trenches completely buried. I refuse to believe their guns can fire forever. Even if we have to drown them in a mountain of our own corpses. We'll carve out a path even if we have to pile up bodies. The Tongzhou front line. The joy of our first victory didn't last very long. I stood on the high ground, watching the dust kick up in the distance again, 10 times more massive than before. My brows locked tight. The tablet's battery is down to just 2%. At most, it'll only let me check the time twice more. Sir, it looks like the Tartars are all here. Changjun stands beside me. The Emperor's sword in his hand is already chipped from the hacking. Just now, he finished off a fallen enemy soldier. His face is smeared with blood, but he looks incredibly hyped. Yeah, they're all here. For the battle ahead, there won't be any high-tech support. No satellite maps, no historical spoilers, nothing left but the most primal clash of wills. I put my tablet away, solemnly tucking it into my coat. Are you scared, Your Majesty? I am, Changjun answers honestly. Then he flashes a grin, showing off a mouth full of bloody teeth. But I just slaughtered a Bayara elite, and it felt damn good. I freeze for a second, then burst out laughing. Ha ha ha, good, that's exactly the fire we need. Turning around, I look at the trenches behind me, at the over 10,000 brothers who, despite being exhausted, now have a fierce light in their eyes. Brothers, that was just the appetizer. The real main course is here. That old bastard Dorgan brought out his entire stash. This is a good thing. Saves us the trouble of hunting him down past the Great Wall later. Today, right here, we are going to sever the destiny of the Great Qing. Fix bayonets. Let's tell Dorgan. Times have changed. In the distance, the horn sounds out, desolate and full of murder. 50,000 troops of the 8 banners' main force blot out the sky, rolling in like a moving iron wall. Slowly closing in with a devastating, apocalyptic pressure. The final battle has begun. On the horizon, the 50,000-strong 8 banners aren't like the first wave. Charging like mindless fools, Dorgan truly is a battle-hardened commander. He quickly found a way to counter our firearms. Push the carts, shield carts. As the command flags wave, rows of massive beasts are pushed out from the Qing army formation. Hundreds of reinforced cowhide shield carts. The thick wooden planks are nailed with soaked cowhide to block flaming arrows. The insides are stuffed with sandbags to stop bullets. Behind every single cart, hide 5 archers and 10 heavily armored infantrymen. Like a moving city wall, they slowly and relentlessly push toward the Ming trenches. From the Ming positions, gunfire erupts once again. But this time, the result makes our blood run cold. Even though the minié balls pack a strong punch, hitting those thick planks covered in wet cowhide and sandbags just kicks up a spray of wood splinters before getting stuck. Occasionally, a bullet slips through a gap, but it's not enough against the dense crowd behind the carts to deal any devastating blows. It's no use. We can't punch through. The battalion commander in the first trench roars, sweating bullets. Sir, the Tartars are pushing their turtle shells up. The shield carts push forward to the 200-meter mark. The Qing archers hiding behind the carts start volley firing. This kind of arcing shot doesn't need aiming. The arrows fly high into the sky, and driven by gravity, plummet straight down into the trenches like rain. Dozens of Ming soldiers are pinned to the ground. Agonizing screams echo one after another. The firepower advantage we just built up is instantly crushed by this ancient, yet highly effective tactic. Damn it, it's Nurhaci's old playbook. I crouched in the command pit, watching the rapidly rising casualties on the tablet. My heart rate sped up with it. This is the sheer brilliance of a civilization at the absolute peak of cold weaponry. Simple, brutal, and effective. Sir, what do we do? Our guns can't pierce them. Chongjun watched a guard beside him get skewered by a stray arrow. His face was deathly pale, but he didn't back down, his hand still gripping that chipped Emperor's sword in a white knuckle hold. Can't pierce them? A ruthless glint flashed in my eyes. Then we blow them to hell. Grabbing the megaphone, I roared at the top of my lungs, Grenadier, get ready. Pull out those bad boys you've been hiding in your pants. Down in the bomb shelters of the third trench, 500 massive, burly men were already itching for a fight. Every single one of them had 4 or 5 black iron lumps hanging from their waists. Modified, 10,000 enemy grenades. I had cast the shells out of pig iron, stuffed them full of granular gunpowder and broken porcelain, and ruthlessly cut the fuses down to just 3 seconds, a straight-up suicide weapon. Let them get closer, closer. I kept my eyes locked on that approaching wall of shields. 100 meters, 50 meters, 30 meters. Through the gaps in the shield carts, we could already see the savage faces of the Qing troops. And their gleaming white teeth. Right now, throw them. The 500 grenadier fiercely thrust half their bodies out of the trenches. Lit the fuses, and with every ounce of strength they had, hurled the iron lumps into the air. 500 black parabolas streaked across the sky, sailed right over the front panels of the shield carts, and dropped squarely into the packed crowds behind them. The Qing soldiers stared at these smoking iron balls rolling around their boots, freezing for a split second. What the hell is TH? A deafening, rapid-fire chain of explosions ripped through the clouds, shaking the very earth beneath us. The supposedly impenetrable shield cart formation was instantly turned into a bloody slaughterhouse. Several carts were blown sky-high by the blast waves, their massive frames crushing the soldiers trapped underneath. Charge! Seizing the moment the Qing army was left deaf and dazed, the frontline soldiers, fueled by raw survival instinct, erupted with terrifying courage. They vaulted out of the trenches, bayonets raised, and plunged right into the smoke-choked enemy lines. The battle instantly devolved into the most brutal, bloody hand-to-hand combat imaginable. Bayonets clashing against sabers, rifle butts caving in helmets, teeth ripping off ears. I didn't charge in. I stayed cold and calculated, barking orders at the second line of defense, hold the line. Gunners, fan out to the flanks. Gun down their reinforcements, ignore the meat grinder in the middle. Just then, a massive Manchurian warrior in white armor, his eyes entirely bloodshot, smashed his spiked mace right through our first line of defense, charging like a freight train straight for Chongzhen's command post. Dog Emperor, give me your life. 2 imperial guards threw themselves in his path, but the brute obliterated their heads like overripe watermelons with a single swing of his mace. Chongzhen's legs turned to jelly, but staring up at that vicious, scarred face, some insane spark of fury ignited inside him. He didn't run. Instead, he let out a guttural roar, swinging his sword like a madman. I am the emperor of the great Ming. I will not yield. The emperor's sword was swatted away by the spiked mace, tearing the webbing of his hand wide open. The brute flashed a sickening grin, raising his mace for the killing blow. Bang! A single gunshot rang out, and the giant's movements completely froze. A bloody third eye suddenly opened up right between his brows. The shot was fired at point-blank range, blowing a massive chunk of red and white brain matter straight out the back of his skull, splashing all over Chongzhen's face. I blew the smoke off my gun barrel, stepped up, and kicked the massive corpse aside. Hauling Chongzhen up from the dirt, I muttered, Your Majesty, next time you want to play the hero, just leave it to me. Chongzhen wiped a smear of brains from his face, gasping heavily for air, yet his eyes burned with a thrill he'd never felt before. I didn't run, I actually killed the enemy. Yeah, you're amazing. I brushed him off, my expression turning grim as I looked into the distance. Don't celebrate just yet, that was just the vanguard. Dorgan's trump card hasn't even hit the field. Far away in the central camp, Dorgan watched the deadlocked battlefield ahead. His face terrifyingly dark, an army of 50,000, stopped dead by a bunch of peasants at some pathetic ditches. Useless, you're all useless. He yanked out his saber and pointed it forward. Pass the order, send in the armored cavalry of the 2 yellow banners. Forget the shield carts, just charge, let the horses trample those Ming dogs into mud. The 2 yellow banners were Hong Taiji's personal guard, the absolute best the Great Qing had to offer. 20,000 heavy cavalrymen covered in thick armor, riding atop fully armored warhorses. slowly began to accelerate. This time, there was no testing the waters. No cover, just a pure, unstoppable torrent of steel. The ground began to pulse to a rhythm, trembling from the resonance of 20,000 horses galloping at once. The vibration was far more terrifying than anything we'd felt before. "Sir," Chongjun stared at the sea of yellow banners blotting out the sky. His voice trembled. How are we supposed to fight that?" I took a deep breath, pulled the tablet from my jacket, and checked the screen. Battery at 1%. The moment was finally here. I turned off the tablet. I tucked it away carefully, as if sealing my farewell to an entire era. Turning around, I roared at the engineer commander behind me, "Pull that damn thing up." The engineers had been waiting in the tall grass ahead of our trenches. Hearing the order, they frantically cranked their winches. Out of the seemingly flat, grassy field, a black barrier suddenly snapped up. It wasn't just a tripwire. It was barbed wire. Hundreds of strands crisscrossed over one another, stretching across the ground 100 meters ahead of the trenches, like a massive spider web. Silently waiting for its prey to strike. "Come and get it, Dorgon. Welcome to the slaughterhouse of the Industrial Revolution." The setting sun was blood red, dyeing the Tongzhou plains a brutal, dark crimson. The 20,000 heavy cavalrymen of the plain and bordered yellow banners, carrying an unstoppable, earth-shattering momentum, kicked up a massive cloud of dust. They surged to within 100 meters of the Ming defenses. At this range, the cavalry had reached their absolute top speed. The riders swung their heavy sabers, howling like wild beasts. In their eyes, the trembling Ming soldiers ahead were nothing more than lambs waiting to be slaughtered. One single charge was all it would take to crush those pathetic dirt trenches. Leading the charge at the very front was the banner commander of the bordered yellow banner, Oboy. He was still a young man, known far and wide as Manchuria's greatest warrior. He rode bare-chested, showing off muscles as hard as forged iron. He wore only a layer of chainmail, riding atop a magnificent, blood-red stallion. He charged ahead of the pack. "Kill them all," Oboy roared, his eyes fixed purely on the dragon flag that symbolized the Ming Empire's authority. But in the very next second, a sickening, bone-chilling tearing sound ripped through the air, followed by the agonizing shrieks of the warhorses. Instantly drowning out the battle cries, the hundreds of warhorses charging at the very front slammed into what seemed like an invisible wall. Under the sheer force of their high-speed impact, the razor-sharp barbs of the wire mesh effortlessly sliced right through the horse's flesh, violently severing the tendons in their legs. But what was even more terrifying was how the wire fiercely coiled and tangled. The more the panicked horses thrashed, the tighter the metal gripped them, and the deeper the barbs dug into their flesh. Oboy suddenly felt his mount drop out from under him. He was launched right into the air, thrown exactly like a boulder from a catapult. Suspended in midair, he looked down in sheer horror. His prized stallion's 4 legs were already shredded to the bone, collapsing to the ground in violent spasms, and the cavalry charging right behind him couldn't stop in time. They plunged right into this web of death, tumbling one after another. Horses violently slammed into each other, shattering bones and snapping tendons. The riders in the back blindly trampled over the bodies of those in front, desperately trying to leap over the carnage, only to realize the deadly wires were strung up in the air too. Their bellies were ripped wide open, spilling their guts all over the bloody dirt. In a matter of mere seconds, that once unstoppable wave of heavily armored cavalry was brought to a dead, brutal halt just 100 meters from the Ming defenses. What kind of dark sorcery is this? Oboy scrambled up from the tall grass, his face completely covered in blood. He wildly hacked at the wires with his blade, but the metal was impossibly tough. Sparks flew with every frantic strike, yet the wire held strong. Fiercely snapping back and slashing his own face. "Open fire, down in the trenches," my voice rang out, cold and merciless. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Stripped of their momentum and tightly packed together, the heavy cavalry made the absolute perfect targets. My men didn't even have to aim. 3,000 flintlock muskets, paired with hundreds of explosive charges, unleashed absolute hellfire upon that chaotic, helpless mass of enemy riders. Every single bullet claimed a life. Every deafening blast sent showers of blood and gore raining from the sky. Those insanely arrogant Manchu nobles, the ones who always treated the Han Chinese like literal pigs and dogs, were now screaming in total despair as they dragged themselves through the mud. Their heavy armor could stop swords, but it couldn't stop the sheer kinetic force of our mini balls. And it definitely couldn't save them from the utter humiliation of being trapped in a net and slaughtered like defenseless animals. Oh boy had already taken several bullets, yet the man was like a cockroach. With staggering willpower, he dragged his shattered, bleeding leg, using the rotting corpses of his own men as shields to helplessly crawl backward inch by inch. He looked around. His elite Bayara warriors, the blood brothers he had literally grown up with, were now piled up in the mud like rotting chunks of meat. For the very first time in his life, true, suffocating fear of death gripped his heart. We can't fight this. Don't stop. Keep firing. Empty your magazines. Kill them all. I stood on the high ground, gripping my spyglass, my eyes completely dead and cold. I felt absolutely zero pity for them. In the original timeline, the 10-day massacre in Yangzhou and the 3 bloodbaths in Jiading were 100 times more brutal than this. What they're paying today is just a tiny fraction of the interest they owe. Far in the distance at the Qing army's main camp, the brass spyglass slipped right out of Dorgan's trembling hands and hit the dirt. He stared blankly ahead at the absolute, nightmarish slaughter taking place on the battlefield. He slumped as if someone had violently ripped out his spine. Those are my elite yellow banners. The absolute lifeblood of the great Qing. Just wiped out, like they were nothing. Retreat, fall back right now, Hong Chengchu screamed, his face completely drained of color. His voice cracked in sheer panic. Your Highness, if we do not retreat this instant, we are going to lose every last bit of the army we have left. Dorgan trembled violently, his eyes bloodshot and wide. He was practically choking on his own frustration. They were just one single step away from the Forbidden City. How the hell were they losing everything to some bizarre metal strings and a bunch of musket-wielding peasants? No retreating. I still have the heavy cannons. Push them all to the front lines. Blow them to pieces. Behind the Qing army lines, 20 heavy cannons were pushed out. This was Dorgan's very last trump card. He wanted to use heavy artillery fire to completely wipe out the Ming army's trenches. You want to play with cannons? I watched the Qing army's movements through my binoculars. A mocking smirk crossed my face. Perfect time to show you guys what real indirect fire looks like. I turned to look behind me. At that deeply dug artillery position, the 30 cannons, fully upgraded by me, equipped with simple dial sights and spiral rifling, were already dialed in with the firing data. And the most crucial part, right before the battle started, I used my tablet to map out the coordinates of the entire battlefield. The Qing artillery positions were sitting right inside my preset kill zone, Sector C coordinates, C-3. Elevation, 35 degrees. Gunpowder charge, 3 pounds. Delay fuse, 5 seconds. I called out a string of firing data. The artillery commander, a former scholar who failed his math exams, but an absolute artillery genius I discovered, quickly flicked the beads on his abacus. He roared, all gun positions, adjust your aim. Coordinates locked, 3 rounds, rapid fire. The Ming army's cannons roared first. The artillery shells traced a high arc in the sky, flying right over the front lines, and smashed with pinpoint accuracy into the Qing artillery positions. Oh crap, an explosive shell flew straight down the barrel of a heavy cannon, setting off the barrels of gunpowder stacked right next to it. A massive chain explosion went off. A giant mushroom cloud erupted into the sky. The violent blast triggered a deadly chain reaction. Over a dozen nearby cannons were instantly swallowed by a sea of fire. Dorgan was blasted flat on the ground by the shockwave, covered in dirt and ash. When he finally dragged himself up, all he saw was his final artillery battalion, turned into nothing but a massive, smoking crater. It was completely wiped out. Dorgan fell to his knees, violently coughing up a mouthful of blood. In that exact moment, he knew. The great Qing's dream of conquering the Central Plains was dead. Your Highness, we must survive to fight another day. Ajij and Dodo rushed forward. They grabbed the limp and defeated Dorgan, completely ignoring all military orders. They turned and ran for their lives. All troops, hear my command. Fall back to Shanhai Pass. We won. The Tartars are running away. Earth-shattering cheers erupted across the Ming army lines. Soldiers threw down their weapons, hugging each other and crying tears of joy. Emperor Chongjun was as excited as a little kid, throwing his arms around my mud-covered body and slapping my back hard. Sir, I won. The great Ming has finally won. I coughed twice from his heavy slaps, but I wasn't smiling at all. Pushing Chongjun off me, I picked up the megaphone from the ground. My voice was hoarse, but it cut right through the entire battlefield. What the hell are you cheering for? Who told you to stop fighting? The whole battlefield went dead silent in an instant. They stared in confusion at me, their ruthless god of war. We must use our full strength to hunt down the fleeing enemy. Don't be fools and stop for empty glory. The Manchu's main forces are still out there. Dorgan is still alive. If we let him escape beyond the Great Wall, in 10 years, he'll be back at our throats. I turned around and glared at Wu Sanggui's army, who had been hiding on our flanks the entire time, too scared to even move a muscle. I roared, Wu Changbo, have you enjoyed the show enough? Now here's your chance to kick them while they're down. Do you want to be the Pingxi king of the great Ming? Or do you want to die alongside Dorgan? In the distance, Wu Sangui looked at the mountains covered in dead Qing soldiers, and then looked at me, standing there like a descending god. He took a deep breath and drew his sword. A flash of absolute resolve gleamed in his eyes. The winner of this chess game had already been decided. If we don't jump on board now, when will we? Guan Ning army, hear my command. All troops, charge, cut off Dorgan. Whoever brings me his head will be rewarded with 10,000 taels of silver. The 50,000 Guan Ning cavalry, who had been saving their strength, finally bared their fangs. Like a pack of starving wolves, they lunged at the completely routed remnants of the Qing army. Watching this unfold, I finally let out a long, heavy sigh and reached into my pocket. My tablet screen had gone completely black. The mission was basically complete. But just then, a violent wave of dizziness hit me. Days of intense fighting, complete lack of sleep, combined with the extreme mental tension of commanding the battle, this physically exhausted body had finally reached its limit. Sir, in the very last second before I blacked out, I saw Emperor Chong Zhen's terrified face rushing toward me. Then, everything went dark. Pain. That was the very first thing I felt when I woke up. My whole body felt like it had been smashed to pieces and then glued back together. Every single joint was screaming in protest. Sir, you're awake. Wang Cheng'en's distinctly high-pitched voice exploded in my ear. He was sobbing, but his tone was filled with undeniable, absolute joy. I struggled to open my eyes, and found myself lying inside a temporary military tent. Above me was a layer of soot-stained canvas, and my nose was filled with the sharp smell of alcohol mixed with herbal medicine. Suddenly, a large face leaned in close. It was His Majesty, Chong Zhen. Your Majesty. I tried to sit up, but Chong Zhen gently pushed me back down. Lie still, don't move. He was rambling with excitement. The royal doctor said that you suffered from severe exhaustion and extreme stress. If anything terrible had happened to you, I swear I would have executed the entire royal hospital to be buried alongside you. Stop threatening to execute people over every little thing. How is the battle going? I tried to force a smile, but the movement just pulled at my wounds. The moment I mentioned the battle, Chong Zhen sat up dead straight, his face glowing with the immense satisfaction of a man who just got his revenge. We won. It's a massive victory. Dorgan's main forces were completely crushed by our barbed wire and cannons at Ba Li Bridge. Those 50,000 Guan Ning cavalry lunged forward like starving wolves, chasing down the remaining bastards like scared little rabbits. They were scattering all over the mountains. In this battle alone, we chopped off over 13,000 of those enemy heads. And what about Dorgan? I asked the single most important question. As long as the regent of the Great Qing remained alive, the backbone of the Qing Empire would survive. Chong Zhen's face darkened slightly. He got away. The old fox saw the battle turning against him, so he left his own brother, Dodo, behind with the plain white banner troops to cover his retreat. He disguised himself in standard foot soldier armor and fled north with just a few hundred of his personal guards. Now he's trapped in the reed marshes down by the Chao Bai River. Wu Sangui has him completely surrounded, but that old bastard is incredibly ruthless. He's making a desperate final stand by the river. Wu Sangui has tried to assault his position a few times, but he's already taken heavy casualties. Didn't take it down? I let out a cold sneer. Forcing myself to sit up, I muttered, Wu Sangui is just half-assing it. He wants to keep Dorgan alive as a bargaining chip, to negotiate with the imperial court. That damn fence-sitter will never change. Help me up. With Wang Chenggen's help, I shakily got to my feet. This final blow, we have to deliver it ourselves. We absolutely cannot let Dorgan cross the river alive. By the banks of the Chao Bai River, The setting sun dyed the river waters a bloody red. The once arrogant prince regent of the great Qing, Dorgan, was now hiding like a beaten dog behind an abandoned dirt mound, a broken arrow still lodged in his left arm. He had fewer than 300 white armor guards left by his side, every single one of them wounded. Despair bled through their eyes, and forming a tight perimeter around them were Wu Sanggui's 30,000 Guaning cavalry, surrounding them so completely that not a drop of water could leak through. Yet, they merely encircled them without attacking, only occasionally firing a stray arrow. "Your Highness, please break through," a company commander wept as he fell to his knees. "Your humble servants will fight to the death to carve a blood-soaked path for you. As long as we make it back to Shengjing, we can make a comeback." Make a comeback. There's no chance left. He knew it all too well. The Great Qing's absolute elite, the 2 yellow banners and the 2 white banners, were almost entirely wiped out in this single battle. More importantly, that invincible spirit, that unshakable belief, was completely shattered by my muskets and barbed wire. Wu Sanggui, that old dog, is just waiting for me to die, so he can take my head and claim credit from Chongjun. But I, Aizen Gyoro Dorgan, will never die at the hands of a Han slave. Just then, the outer encirclement suddenly parted to make way. A tattered, yet still brilliantly colored, sun and moon banner of the Ming dynasty flapped fiercely in the freezing wind. A flatbed carriage pulled by 4 horses slowly approached. 2 men sat on the carriage. Chongjun, dressed in his imperial dragon robes, and me, my face deathly pale. "Wu Chongbo, why haven't you made a move? Are you waiting for the new year?" My voice, amplified through a crude tin megaphone, echoed across the entire battlefield. Wu Sanggui, sitting on his horse, froze stiff. He never expected that Chongjun and I would show up in person. I was only afraid that a cornered beast would fight back and hurt our brothers. "Excuses," I cut him off, my gaze sweeping past the Guaning army and piercing straight toward Dorgan behind the dirt mound. "Dorgan, come out and let's have a chat." From behind the mound, Dorgan slowly stood up. Across a distance of several hundred meters, our eyes met in the air. It was a stare down between 2 distinct eras. One, the nomadic overlord of the old age. The other, the industrial believer of the new age. "So, you are that sorcerer." Dorgan's voice was hoarse, like sandpaper grinding against the ground. "I am your undertaker. Dorgan, you are a hero. I won't humiliate you. I'm giving you a chance to die like a true warrior." I turned my head and waved to the people behind me. 10 soldiers wearing hastily dyed camouflage strips stepped forward, holding specially crafted long rifles. This was the elite instructor squad I had specially trained back in the wounded soldiers' camp. The guns in their hands were the 10 most accurate rifled muskets in the entire army. They were equipped with optical scopes, ground down and pieced together from tablet camera lenses, standard lenses, and reading glasses. This is the absolute highest level of a sniper decapitation strike. Dorgan seemed to sense what was coming. He didn't even try to hide. Instead, he straightened his robes, facing north, toward the direction of Shengjing, his homeland. "Warriors of the Great Qing, ride with me to our deaths." Dorgan drew his blade, launching one final charge. 300 surviving soldiers let out their ultimate battle cry, following close behind him, charging straight into that line of steel. Distance, 400 meters. A calm voice called out the range. 10 snipers lay prone on the ridge, holding their breath in dead silence. Their rifle barrels tracked the sprinting figure. 300 meters. Dorgan was running incredibly fast. There was no fear in his eyes, only a sense of absolute release. 200 meters. Fire. 10 gunshots roared together as one. The sprinting Dorgan, his chest suddenly exploded into a mist of blood. The massive kinetic force lifted his body, throwing him violently backward, crashing hard into the thick mud of the riverbank. The battlefield fell into a dead silence. A legendary warlord of his generation, the true ruler of the Great Qing Empire, just like that, perished under a ruthless, unglamorous sniper volley. There was no epic duel, no fighting for 300 rounds, no dramatic last words. This was the cold reality of the firearm era, the great equalizer. Seeing their commander fall in battle, the remaining Qing troops dropped their weapons one by one, dropping to their knees and weeping bitterly. Watching that fallen figure from afar, a violent shiver ran down Wu Sanggui's spine. He instinctively grabbed at his own throat. If that shot had been aimed at him, he frantically threw himself off his horse and groveled before the imperial carriage, slamming his head against the ground. Your Majesty is blessed by the heavens. The Grandmaster's strategies are divine. The traitor Dorgan has been executed. Chongjun stared at the scene, letting out a long, shuddering breath. The suffocating mountain that had crushed his chest for over a decade was finally shattered. Sir, he turned to look at me, his eyes filled with absolute awe. Is this what you meant by a dimensional strike? I closed my heavy eyes in exhaustion, leaning back against the carriage. No, this is called taking out the trash. With Dorgan dead, the situation in the north cleared up in an instant. The remnants of the Qing army, led by Dodo, fled back beyond the Great Wall in total panic. But they were no longer a threat, having lost their absolute backbone in Dorgan. Combined with the total loss of their elite forces, the Manchus for the next 50 years would be left shivering in the frozen wilderness. Our only remaining headache was Li Zicheng out in the west. Li Zicheng hadn't just been sitting around. When he heard that Dorgan had breached the pass, and that the Ming forces were engaged in a bloody showdown at Tongzhou, he had originally planned to just sit back and watch them destroy each other. He quietly moved his massive army to Baoding, ready to sweep in and slaughter the survivors once the Ming and Qing had bled each other dry. But when the news hit that Dorgan had been killed in action, and the Eight Banners army was utterly wiped out, the roasted lamb leg slipped right out of the dashing king's trembling hands. This is impossible. Li Zicheng paced frantically back and forth in his tent, drenched in cold sweat. Those were the invincible Eight Banner elites, for God's sake. What kind of crazy pill did Chongjun swallow? How did he suddenly get so damn terrifying? My king, we need to pull out. Let's fall back to our turf in Shaanxi, Niu Jinxing urged nervously. We can't stay near the capital anymore. That Grandmaster of his is totally cursed. Word is he can summon down heavenly thunder. Even that old dog Wu Sangui is groveling at his feet like a little bitch. Pull out? Pull out to where? Li Zicheng laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. The whole world is watching right now. If I just tuck my tail between my legs and run, morale will tank and my army will be impossible to lead. Just then, a loud shout echoed from outside the tent. The great Ming's special envoy has arrived. Li Zicheng gasped in shock, immediately drawing his sword. Who goes there? As the tent flap was pushed aside, the person who walked in was none other than Wang Chengen. The old eunuch was walking with a real swagger now, dressed in a brand new robe. He wasn't carrying an imperial decree, but rather holding a black box in his hands. Dashing King Li, I hope you've been well, Wang Chengen said with a smile, placing the box onto the table. What is this? Li Zicheng asked, his guard up. My master said he wanted to give the dashing king a little welcome gift. Wang Chengen opened the box, revealing a gruesomely preserved human head inside. It was Dorgan's head. Even after being treated, those wide, unblinking dead eyes still sent shivers straight down everyone's spines. Li Zicheng and his generals gasped in pure terror. Is that the Prince Regent, Dorgan? Wang Chengen brushed it off casually. My master said he originally wanted to turn this head into a chamber pot. But then he figured, since the dashing king is a true hero of our time, you might actually appreciate this trophy. So, he had it sent over especially for your amusement. Li Zicheng swallowed hard. He felt a sudden, icy chill on the back of his neck. This wasn't a gift. This was a blatant threat. It was a message saying, I've already slaughtered Dorgan. Crushing you would be easier than squashing a bug. What the hell was Chongjun plotting? Li Zicheng gritted his teeth and demanded, if he wants a war. My army of 300,000 men aren't exactly pushovers. Oh, dashing king, let's not get carried away. Wang Chengen pulled a letter from his robe and handed it over. My master said, we are all brothers of the Han. Fighting amongst ourselves only makes us a laughingstock to outsiders. This is a proposal for the establishment of the Great Ming Western Construction Corps. Please, take a look, dashing king. A construction corps? Li Zicheng took the letter, completely baffled. The letter was written by me. The wording was incredibly blunt. Old Li. I know, you only rebelled so the common folks could have something to eat. Well, the great Ming is rich now. We raided the corrupt officials and now we have plenty of grain. If your 300,000 men try to fight me, I guarantee I will turn you all into fertilizer within 3 days. But I don't have the heart for that. The imperial court is severely short-staffed right now. If you are willing to surrender, I will crown you the king of the Northwest. As for your army of 300,000, they will be reorganized into the Great Ming Western Development Army Group. You will have only one mission: march west and conquer the Zungars, the Yarkand Khanate, and even further west into Central Asia. There are massive cotton fields and rich mineral deposits out there. Go and take them down. You get to rule the territory, just hand over half the tax revenue. If you need money, I'll fund you. If you need guns, I'll arm you. Well, just the retired, old-fashioned matchlocks, of course. In short, rather than fighting amongst ourselves, it's much better to go out and terrorize. Oh, wait, no. Go and civilize the foreign lands. Are you in or out? Li Zicheng's hands were literally shaking as he held the letter. These terms were incredibly tempting. After all, didn't he rebel just to secure a noble legacy for his family? Didn't he just want wealth and glory? Now, not only was Emperor Chongjun sparing his life, he was crowning him a king. He was letting him go west to rule as his own local emperor. And giving him money and guns to do it. How on earth was this an amnesty offer? It's literally a startup partnership. This is real. Li Zicheng couldn't believe it. An emperor never goes back on his word. Wang Chengen puffed out his chest. My sir said to think bigger. The world is so big, don't you want to go see it? Li Zicheng fell silent for a long time. Finally, he threw his sword on the ground. All right, I'm in. He slammed his hand on the table. Since we can't beat them anyway, we might as well head west and live it up. Tell Chongjun. No, tell His Majesty. Old Li accepts the decree. I'll take the boys out west to plant cotton right away. Over at the Palace of Heavenly Purity in the Forbidden City, upon hearing the news of Li Zicheng's surrender, Chongjun was absolutely dumbfounded. Sir, will this really work? Those are roving bandits. Letting the tiger back into the mountains will definitely come back to bite us. He paced around anxiously. If it were up to me, we should strike while the iron is hot and wipe them all out. I was lying on a recliner, my body still recovering, using that dead screen tablet as a mirror to shave. Wipe them all out? 300,000 men, how long would it take to kill them all? And once they're dead, who's going to guard the northwest? Blew the foam off my razor and continued. Your Majesty, this is what we call united front value. Li Zicheng is a double-edged sword. Use him well, and he's your vanguard for expanding the territory. Throw him out to the western regions. Let him go tear into the Zungars. Let him tear into Tsarist Russia. The more aggressively he plunders on the outside, the more stable the Great Ming will be on the inside. This is called diverting the floodwaters to the west. Get it? Chongjun stood frozen for a long time. He carefully chewed over these words, his eyes growing brighter and brighter. Diverting the floodwaters west. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Sir, you are truly a godsend. He suddenly felt that all those books on imperial statecraft he had studied before were a complete waste of time. Now this was true imperial statecraft, turning the enemy's greed into your own driving force. Meanwhile, I put down the tablet, my eyes turning serious. This is only the first step. The big things we're going to do next are way harder than fighting a war. What big things? Distributing land, collecting taxes, building factories, and opening up maritime trade. Conquering an empire is easy. Ruling it is the hard part. If you don't want Li Zicheng to rebel again, and you don't want the Manchus breaching the pass again, you have to make sure the commoners are well fed, and sail the Great Ming's warships all the way to the other side of the ocean. October, the 17th year of Chongjun. It had been half a year since that earth-shattering Jiashan incident. The city of Beijing had long since taken on a completely new look. The once heavily battered city walls had been fully restored, but I specifically kept a section outside the Donghua Gate. Those fire-blackened bricks, serving as a monument to our national humiliation. The streets were bustling with people, and the sounds of street vendors crying out their wares echoed everywhere. But the biggest change was the heavy presence of patrol guards on the streets, wearing homespun, green-dyed camouflage uniforms. That was the new Army's military police force, established single-handedly by me. They were exclusively in charge of public security and sanitation. If anyone dared to relieve themselves in public, there was no need to throw them in jail. They'd just get slapped with a direct fine of 1 tael of silver. Plus 3 days of sweeping the streets. Under such tyranny, Beijing City actually became the cleanest city in the entire world. In front of the Hall of Imperial Supremacy, a massive military parade was underway. However, the ones marching at the very front weren't the cavalry. It wasn't archers either, but a massive artillery square. 30 brand new field guns, gleaming with a metallic luster, rumbled past, pulled by towering warhorses. Following right behind them were infantrymen wielding the state-of-the-art Chongjun No. 1 flintlock muskets and pre-packaged paper cartridges, forming a tight infantry square as they marched in perfect goose step. The rhythmic crunch of their boots struck awe into the surrounding foreign envoys from Joseon and Ryukyu, and even left a few captured Dutch prisoners trembling in absolute terror. Up on the city wall, Emperor Chongjun stood wearing a modified, form-fitting dragon robe, designed for horseback riding, looking incredibly radiant. His posture was perfectly straight now, completely shedding the defeated, stray dog despair he had just 6 months ago. And standing right beside him was still me, dressed in my flying fish robe. It's just that I no longer held that magical, heavenly tablet in my hands. That tablet completely ran out of battery 3 months ago, turning into a very expensive black brick. I locked it away in the deepest depths of the Imperial Vault, and labeled it an ancient divine artifact, strictly forbidding future generations from tampering with it. Sir, Chongjun said, looking at the cheering crowds below, suddenly overcome with emotion. These past 6 months, I honestly feel like I've been dreaming. If it weren't for you, I'd probably be nothing but a pile of dry bones by now. Your Majesty, the dream is over. You have to walk the road yourself now. I leaned against the railing, looking out at the distant sunset. Without the tablet, without my cheat codes, I was now just an ordinary guy with a modern mindset. The road ahead is going to be incredibly tough. The Industrial Revolution can't be sparked with just a few blueprints. It's a massive gap that'll take generations to fill. I know, I've already approved the 5-year plan you proposed. Lifting the maritime ban, establishing customs, building massive ships. Even if I don't live to see it, my sons and grandsons will surely see the day the great Ming's dragon flag flies across the 4 seas. Just then, Wang Chuan came trotting over, clutching an urgent dispatch. Wonderful news, Your Majesty. The dashing King Li. Oh, wait, no. The King of the Northwest has sent a victory report. He absolutely crushed the Zungar forces at Hami. He captured countless cattle and sheep. Hey, he even sent Your Majesty a few exotic dancers from the western regions. Chongjun and I locked eyes, and we both burst into uncontrollable laughter. Old Li is still a bandit at heart, Chongjun said, laughing. Forget the dancers. Tell him to ship all the gold he looted right back to me. I need to build a railway. Wang Cheng froze. A railway? What might that be? Sir says it's a magnificent metal dragon that races across the land. Chongzhen's eyes sparkled with sheer wonder. With it, we could travel from dawn to dusk in the blink of an eye. The great Ming Empire will stand eternally secure. I leaned my back against the ancient wall, gazing out at this ancient, yet brilliantly young empire. I hadn't time traveled back home. Maybe it was because my mission wasn't finished yet. Or maybe because the massive inertia of history had been shattered, the space-time tunnel simply closed forever. But I honestly didn't care anymore. As a history major, what could possibly be more exhilarating than taking a surgical scalpel to a dying dynasty and personally transforming it into an empire on which the sun never sets? Sir, what exactly do we do next? I stretched my arms out wide, pointing up at the starry sky emerging above us. Your Majesty, we've pretty much wrapped up everything here on Earth. Now, it's time we figure out how to plant the great Ming flag right up there on the moon. Chongjun stared blankly, lifting his head to gaze at the bright, glowing moon. The moon? Is the goddess Chang'e really up there? Hey, who knows? Just send someone to check it out, then we'll know.